Bitcoiners, I hope this makes sense. My setup is slightly different today. Let me make sure it's all coming through. Because I was on FedWatch yesterday with Ansel Linder, when I loaded the show up this morning, everything was stuck in... Hold on, what's going on here? What is going on here? Okay, we should be good. We should be good. Yeah, so this is what happened. I loaded the show up without realizing in the Bitcoin Magazine restream. Normally I broadcast from my own and then it pairs with the Bitcoin Magazine, but the setup is a little different. So let me just see if people are coming in. It looks like we're good. It looks like we're good. I'm seeing people come in. We're good. We're good. We're good. We're good. It's a little different, but it worked out. It's basically just backwards to how I normally do it. Let's do some Bitcoin, you guys. Indeed. Let's do some Bitcoin. Indeed, indeed, indeed. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So it's real cloudy here in Montreal. I almost said New York. I don't live in New York anymore. Real cloudy here in Montreal, but there's definitely a sunrise. I can confirm East Coast of North America has a sun. Bitcoin running. All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. Let's see, Karan Patel. Hi, I need help with my shipment. Had emailed you all. Can you please check and resolve the issue? Karan, I'm not involved in the shipping stuff, but someone will get back to you, I'm sure. We used to do a lot of this stuff on our normal daily broadcast. We'd do some of these things, but there you go. We've got, hello, my name is Toronto BTC Conference this weekend versus Formula One in Montreal weekend. Yeah, hello, my name is, I'm headed to Toronto. I've done enough F1 things in Montreal in my life. It was always a big deal and a big weekend, but it's really not welcoming for locals in a sense, because all of a sudden, if you want to go out for dinner, you got to buy a bottle of alcohol and all these kinds of things. There's a lot of crowds that we're not used to. Even now I can hear them. So I'm happy to be heading away. I got married in the F1 track. I have enough connection to the F1 track and spend enough time on the F1 track in Montreal. The F1 track is actually public property, public space. Anyone can go anytime. And so, you know, I've spent plenty of time down there. I don't need to see. What is cool though, what is amazing is that we've had both the Indy races and Formula One here in Montreal before, and it is amazing. Just even being able to hear the difference in the engines, for example. If you're in downtown when the F1 cars start, it's a couple miles away and on an island in the river, not on the island where the city of Montreal is built, a separate island. And you can hear the engines start at start time. It's like rocket going off. Little dinky Indy cars. It's like that's pretty amazing just to see the engineering. So there you go. There you go. So yeah, indeed, Hodling Eric, we are going to be doing the RFK. Well, we'll be doing both the Tucker recap and the RFK recap. But first, before we get into that kind of fun news, we got to do the even funner news, right? Even more fun. What's more fun than RFK, Tucker, all these kinds of things? Well, here's what you need to know. The New York Post, not that interested in talking about crime the way they used to. They have a new euphemism to discuss crime. All right, so here it is. Shirtless stranger kicks woman who's 75 years old, leaving the Macy's Herald Square, right? So the stranger did it, right? Here's another one from the New York Post. Stranger threatens a toddler in a stroller, stabs mom in brutal daylight New York City attack. So a lot of strangers going around New York, a lot of strangers, right? Strangers. Okay, stranger. There you go. The other news that people are chatting about today is this BlackRock ETF situation. Now, it's a bit of a weird story. So here's what I know. I know that a few years ago, in normally the way the SEC worked for years was the following. If you wanted to have an ETF, now, as someone who worked for CoinDesk, and we follow the ETF story very closely, and I can even remember in early 2017, everyone in the CoinDesk offices waiting for the SEC to give its judgment on the Winklevi ETF. So it's been sort of a wait and see big time in the industry for years now, right? So since 2017, it's been what everyone's talking about, what's going on with these ETFs. A rule change happened a few years later when I was working at Kraken that I thought was really important. And I started to stress it as like, this is strange, what's going on here. It was at the same time that Brian Brooks was in charge of the OCC, the Office of the Controller of the Currency, and was suggesting that actually all big banks can do custody. Don't worry, you don't need special powers. We don't need to write a special law for US commercial banks to get into the custodian business in Bitcoin and crypto, because actually the powers are already there. So guess what? Go out and do all this custodial work. All you need to do is get some form of specialization, and you'll know how to offer the service. At the same time, the SEC was making huge changes, right? So I don't know if you guys know this, but the SEC, so until then, as I was mentioning, so just keep that OCC thing in your head at once, right? Because at the same time, the SEC was making changes to ETF applications, and they were like this. Before that, the redeemability of an ETF, right? You have to have redeemability. So the composite that is in the ETF, the pieces that make up the ETF can be traded in, and the person who's constructed the ETF has to have a way to redeem those assets that make up the ETF. So say it's gold, say it's like environmental ETF, right? All the stocks that go into it can change. The underlying stocks that go into the ETF can change. That's the design of the issuer to do. But they have to show that they have the capacity to redeem these so that you don't get sort of a selling things you don't have situation, right? So what happened in 2020 is a long-standing change came about, which is that the SEC did not require any longer some of the larger asset managers, such as BlackRock, to apply for specific ETF permits or to create and generate these ETFs to begin with every single time. They were given kind of a blanket okay to do it. As I said, each and every ETF in history needed to be individually submitted to the SEC. Now, they were allowed to change the construction inside of it as it was live, but in order to get it done in the first place, they had to show they could do it and it would work. So the SEC in 2020 gave everyone sort of permission, not everyone, pardon me, the big issuers like BlackRock permission to just issue ETFs as they saw fit. They didn't have to apply anymore. They could start using these ETFs as a almost like a brand new product pipeline that didn't require as much regulatory oversight to begin with. Now, the reason I mention this in the context of the OCC is because I had made a case in Kraken at that time, because I was working as a strategist, that look out, the big banks are going to be able to do everything that these crypto incumbents, if you will, have been doing for years, and they're not going to have to go through any hurdles. So I said, suddenly you're going to see a lot of activity in the custodianship and in the issuance of ETFs. Now, I didn't say they were going to happen immediately. What I said is when they feel like doing it, they can just jump right ahead of us and basically eat our lunch as an industry. And now that is more or less what I see happening here. There's some moving parts, and I'm going to mention in a few seconds one theory that Noel Atchison, who I used to work with, had on this. But first of all, let's just get to the details, right? You get Alan Farrington saying a trust, so it's not an ETF. Indeed, he is correct in pointing this out, because if they actually went full throttle to the ETF, it's my understanding that they wouldn't even need this application. It's the trust aspect of it that they need. Now, in its behavior, its performance is very different than the Grayscale trust. The Grayscale trust has a lockup. Not exactly the same. This has no lockup. Instant redeemability is what I understand. It's what I understand. But now people talking about it. Now here's what I want to know. And here's where I'm coming down on this. And this is really what Noel Atchison believes. And I think where this is headed. So this is what she says. My take on the BlackRock BTC ETF filing is big news. BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager. It's not going to happen. BlackRock knows this. Rather, it is sending a political message. Larry Fink is a prominent Democrat. So her theory, right? Her theory Now she's doing some mind reading here, right? We can't deny that. A pleb Bitcoiner's diary asked her straight up in the Twitter thread that went after that and said, it's just to send a political message. What message would it be? So Noel said that a prominent supporter of the Democrat Party plus presumably prominent donor does not support Gensler's approach to the problem by bringing crypto into regulatory compliance. It's a subliminal message that, in BlackRock's opinion, the Dems should reconsider their crypto stance. Is that true? Does it hold water? Hard to tell. I can't tell if it really does hold water. But if we are dealing with what might be the case, a sort of political, economic dissent, and indeed subliminal messages, well, why are they being done that way? Well, maybe Tucker's show last night had something to do with it, right? Maybe, just maybe. So what did Tucker do his show on last night? Episode number 4 of Tucker on Twitter dropped. Let's just do the quick count, right? Because we're looking at these numbers, right? We're looking at the numbers. His so just want to see if I get any more of these folks on talking about optimistic take. Yeah, like a start 9 approach HBDC. I don't know exactly what that means, Randmore. I don't know what a start 9 is. If you could tell me in the links later, I'll know. LinkedIn user says FTX coming back in November will use to fund the. Hey, it could be. It really could be. But we're going to get there. That's exactly where we're headed. Okay, not to the FTX specifics, but we're talking about election finance and those kinds of things. Yes, exactly. Once I get some eyes on it, I will probably propose it to start 9's app list. Okay, yeah, didn't know that. Okay, so going from the political, going to Tucker, let's just mention quickly the Tucker numbers, right? So number 3, which I mentioned, was at 30-something million the morning of our broadcast, right? Went on to do about 90-something million impressions. Still, we don't know the views, but we got to find out. This one this morning was only at like 15, right? So if it moves up to 60, he's still way ahead of his numbers from Fox. So we're still there, but we're going to continue to follow the progress, right? We'll still see what's going on. So first of all, the Tucker Carlson segment was all about this, the Chiron at the bottom of Fox News, the day of Trump's arraignment. So the day of Trump's arraignment, he of course gave a speech after in New Jersey, and it's pretty funny. So what ends up happening is Fox puts up both the former President Trump and Biden both simultaneously giving speeches. And the Chiron rent wannabe dictator speaks at the White House after having his political rival arrested. And so obviously this guy ends up getting fired, right? Because, oh gosh, you can't say that. It's just the worst. So no one can say all these things. And Tucker ended up doing like a list. He did the whole show as if it was sort of a facetious take, right? Oh, of course not. He wouldn't be a dictator, right? Being a dictator requires actually a lot of work. It's not that simple. You can't just say you're a dictator. It's kind of like addressing what people said about Trump, right? Remember when people said Trump was fascist and a dictator? It was because he was charismatic. It's because he was funny that he was a dictator, because being charismatic is the proxy definition for some people anyway of being a dictator. So if you're up there being uncouth and mixing it up and being arrogant and being a bully, right? And remember what I've always said about Trump and why I understand why some people just can't stomach him is because he is a bully. But being a bully is not synonymous with being a dictator, right? So Tucker gets into the actual work it takes to be a dictator, and he says, well, it would never happen, right? They wouldn't live in wealth, right? They wouldn't live flaunting their wealth around while everyone else is poor. And then he shows a few houses of the Biden estates and how they live, and it's very nice, right? You wouldn't put surveillance on your population and then arrest people for merely protesting, right? And then you wouldn't arrest their family members, certainly. And then they talked about Ashley Babbitt, who was shot in the face during the January 6th protest. And then the mother protesting the death of her daughter was also arrested, and that's on camera, so he's playing that. Then he said, like, the other important step to dictator, and he mentioned the North Korean president, and he had a big tumor on the back of his neck, and the media never paid attention. That was an important definition for dictatorship. And then he said, they would ignore the health concerns that the leader has, that the deal leader has, in order to cement their reputation. And of course, they start showing, he shows all these images of Biden trying to talk. I had notes of one of them where he was just trying to say a normal sentence. It makes no sense, right? We're going to be in, there's 12 people who are going to do stuff. And then what are we going to say, right? Then he says, of course, they would have the family lawlessness. He mentions Saddam Hussein's sons who went around doing everything. And then he shows all the interspersed crack smoking pictures of Hunter Biden. Then he talks a bit about the Philadelphia speech. Of course, there's these speeches given with the dramatic backdrops. And he was, of course, referring to the Philadelphia speech that Biden gave last year when he called MAGA people the biggest terrorists going, and you got to stop them. And the news. So this was really, I think, the kicker of what Tucker managed to do yesterday. He said, surely the news wouldn't excuse away these kind of speeches. They would say, hey, you were acting a little terrible, and it looked a little bit like a dictator, and you were supporting the military over individual people. You were talking about using the military in America against individual people who were trying to embrace their gun rights, because that's what the speech was, right? It was you think you have guns and they're going to help you have a revolution if you need it against a dictator, but guess what? You can't fight against F-14s and F-16s. So he actually said that, that the American population had to worry about fighter jets shooting them. And so this was all explained away by the following note. It says, MSNBC went on to say that he wasn't talking about killing Americans with the military. No. He was actually showcasing his faith in the military apparatus and its ability to back the Democrat world order. And then he didn't finish on that. He went further to the kids one, of course, the common conceit within dictatorships and totalitarian societies being that children move from being within the family unit and become kids of the state. So he mentioned that whole they are our kids speech that he gave this week from the White House. So Tucker basically made a checklist of what a wannabe dictator needs to do, and then showed how this fella was very successfully completing the required curriculum in order to be a dictator. Now, let's just put that all in context of what happens next, right? So here's what we know about what happens next. Now, I don't know if this is true at all, but remember, we've been talking about this Burisma person, right? The Burisma whistleblower. So let's go back to the dictator talk for a second, right? The dictator talk. Now, this is unconfirmed. This is coming at you from this morning. Do not know if it's true. Difficult to tell. People were talking about it yesterday. Don't know. Again, I'm telling you, this is unconfirmed. Could be fake news. I do not want to put fake news in front of you in the mornings, other than our enjoyable Moscow time. But this is what some people are saying on the internet. Totally could be fake. Don't know. Right, don't know. But that Burisma whistleblower that people have been talking about, that has the details about the money and splitting and Hunter and Joe and what happened and 2014 and all that stuff. Well, apparently that whistleblower is dead, right? Apparently that whistleblower died, killed, found dead. A few people saying it, right? They say it's been fact checked. Some people say it's been fact checked. Again, very easy to put this stuff up there that's fake, but here's the headline. Burisma energy accountant who blew whistle on Biden bribery scheme found dead. The chief accountant at Ukraine's Burisma Energy, who offered to provide U.S. authorities with damning evidence regarding financial crimes involving Joe and Hunter Biden, has been found dead before she could testify, right? Again, I don't know, right? And I'm not sitting here telling you I do know, because I don't know. But what I do know related to that, is hearing this talk about, you know, them getting killed, and it sort of goes further, right? It's not just them getting killed. You've got the Gal Luft. You know, remember Gal Luft? Here's some things I didn't know about Gal Luft, though. Gal Luft is the fella that also said he had the details. He is Israeli secret something, right? This guy, I wouldn't trust him necessarily, right? I wouldn't trust him necessarily, but he was arrested in Cyprus for being an arms dealer, and he says, this part sounds trustworthy. I've never dealt arms in my whole life. Now, he's another one of these people who has whistleblowing information on the DOJ, FBI, and what's going on with Hunter Biden. We've talked about him several times here in the mornings, right? So here's some simulation stuff, guys. Here's where the simulation is starting to get real, because I had no idea about any of this. So Gal Luft is, they try to arrest him. He says he's got the details. But do you know what Gal Luft does other than the not arms dealing? So they say he's a director, energy security, geopolitics, but he wrote a book a couple of years ago. He wrote a book. Believe it or not, he wrote a book. It's not just him on what's going on with Biden and all those people. Now, it seems like he is associated with Israeli secret intelligence, secret service. That I'm just guessing, but that's what it looks like to me. And he wrote a book. He wrote a book in 2019. Do you know what the book was about? Does anyone know? It's on de-dollarization. He's one of the foremost experts on planet Earth in de-dollarization, and he wrote an article just the other day. So his book is called De-Dollarization, Revolt Against the Dollar and the Rise of a New Financial World Order. He wrote it in 2019, right? So he wrote recently in China Daily about his book and talking about what's going on. And I mean, just recently, while he's been on the lam and running away from the wannabe dictator, he's been writing stuff like this. And he says, the rallying cry for de-dollarization, which until recently had been raised by some ostracized leaders, is now becoming mainstream. This month, French President Emmanuel Macron called for Europe to reduce its reliance on the US dollar to avoid becoming vassals of the US. A week later in Shanghai, Brazilian President Lula da Silva called on developing countries to work toward replacing the US dollar. And driving these calls for de-dollarization are two mutually reinforcing trends. The first is the growing discomfort with the US's international behavior, especially its overly aggressive use of economic coercion and long-arm jurisdiction. Today, 1 in 10 countries are under US sanctions, and tens of thousands of individuals and corporations are excluded from the global banking system because they violated so-called Washington's rules. Companies are unable to conduct business with their counterparts in countries with which their governments have no dispute, just because of the fear of being targeted by unnecessary US sanctions. And the second trend is the growing sense among countries that the dollar is no longer a safe store of value due to the US economic practices, especially its out-of-control spending and its ballooning national debt, right? So a quarter of US debt is owned by foreign countries, many of them no longer willing to increase their holdings of US debt. Last year, Japan and China, the two largest holders of US treasuries, jointly reduced their holdings by $400 billion, equivalent to half of the US defense budget. In the same year, US deficit reached $1.8 trillion. Now, here's what he says. His conclusion is the following. To be sure, both the US and its currency will continue to play a central role in world affairs for many years to come. But in the new order, there will be no room for hegemony, superpowers, and winner-takes-all strategies. And as Republican Senator Marco Rubio recently lamented, the US will increasingly lose its ability to sanction other countries. Under currency multipolarity, money will return to become what it was always intended to be, a means of exchange and a store of value, not an instrument of economic statecraft, right? So weirdly, who knows why, one of the people who knows most about the Biden corruption also happens to be out there pushing narratives around de-dollarization. So I'm not going to say he's even an expert. I'm not even going to say he's sincere in this, right? We should have learned a long time ago that people involved in spin, in national security operations don't necessarily speak honestly. The whole point is to influence and persuade and push, right? So everything he's saying here fits that mold, that he is involved in some form of narrative control, some form of persuasion, some form of manipulation, and that he's got this theory and that it actually has a lot of weight in America. But Add that sentiment, which I think he's accurate about, right? I don't think anything he's saying there isn't something that we can't all agree on and perceive internationally. But how do you bottle it? How do you articulate it? How do you go further to underline how national security interests, how the deep state, how spies and persuaders and manipulators, how they have used the dollar and the US war machine in order to create this imperial presence in the world. Now, remember, America weirdly has oscillated in its history between two poles, right? It has been at once a revolutionary force and an imperial power, and oscillates between those two realities as it proceeds through its historic growth trajectory in the books of history in the world and the greatest empires and all that kind of stuff. So it does have this seemingly opposite polarity baked into it, right? It's just sort of there, right? It is at once an imperial power. We can't deny that. It has grown into being this imperial power. But at a certain point, that orientation can no longer be the driving thing, and it has to revert back to what it primordially was, which was a revolutionary force. And we're seeing those forces at play. And how are we seeing them? Well, weirdly, this imperial track that America fell down happened at the same time as JFK was murdered, right? So JFK was murdered in 1963. In 1964, as we mentioned many times here, that's when the actual hegemonic America starts to move. And yesterday, RFK was on Joe Rogan and had an amazing, almost play-by-play of how it happened, right? So it's amazing to hear these stories from the inside, in a sense. So RFK was mentioning that he was actually with his uncle and his father when Eisenhower gave his famous military-industrial complex farewell speech, right? So he was there. He was in the room with the new president hearing this stuff. And he gave the actual blow-by-blow of what it was like in the White House. Now, he was a kid, but it seems that he was still aware enough, right? So he was 10 years old. He's aware enough to know what's going on. We found out exactly what happened with the Cuba situation and the CIA, and how much the warmongers were trying to lure Kennedy into this stuff, right? So we found out that the Bay of Pigs thing was the deep state trying to get JFK to send the military into Cuba. In the end, JFK looks terrible because they send all of these Cuban fake soldiers that are really revolutionaries. No revolution happens. They get slaughtered on the beach. They ask for military support. Kennedy just basically has to let them die, right? Which is what happened. And that was a big embarrassment, and the Bay of Pigs, and oh my goodness. But right away, he understood, and this is what RFK says in the interview, he understood, and he only lived 1,000 more days. And in those 1,000 days, he was at war with the CIA. And that's where he came up with that line. He knew they were now lying to him, and that's where he came up with his line that I will splinter them into 1,000 pieces and throw them and scatter them into the wind. And that's where his line comes from, because of this deception. Now, he ends up also finding out, for example, that they're lying to him about Vietnam. He asked for a casualty list from Vietnam. It turns out that 75 Green Beret soldiers were killed. And he said, it's too many, get them all out tomorrow. And this was just before he was assassinated. So this appetite to coordinate the war machine, money, and propaganda was not going to abide by a president who was uppity. There was going to be no uppity presidents, right? That was not happening. And if you listen to RFK describe this stuff, right away, Joe asked him, right, on the show, that if you get an office, do you not even if you get an office, but here you are making headlines. Remember what we said yesterday, the polls have him ahead of Biden, ahead of Biden in the likability or all that stuff. It was a bit of a scam poll in a sense. It's not what are your intentions, who do you think is going to win and all that. It was just in his favorability for president. He beat every candidate, RFK did. Not the same as voting. He says, RFK, when asked about, do you think the CIA is going to get you? He says, I got to be careful. I'm aware of that danger. I don't live in fear of it at all. I take precautions. And, as someone who was around RFK a few times in Miami, I can say that it's something that you think about, right? You're just like, well, because I had to stay outside of a house and wait about half an hour before I could even get in to meet him. And that's what it was like for almost everyone. Some people got in really quick, but a lot of people had to take time. They had to look into things and all that. So I was happy that was happening. I definitely did not want to see any kind of lax security there. And in fact, I saw him leaning on a boat at one point, RFK, right? He was sort of leaning off a banister, or sorry, a balcony. And I told, because he has, security guards, I said, don't let him fall there. Not going to be good. He's a little exposed, right? A little exposed where he is. And of course, everyone had already thought the same. And by the way, you actually do get a sense too when you look at some of the images with him on Joe Rogan. Not everyone can see it in some of the speeches and all that, but you don't realize what in good shape he is. He's really in good shape. I mean, this guy is not a lot of body fat on RFK Jr. By the way, this is an actual in shape president. That I, as someone who loves Trump, never liked his physical. Didn't like his diet, didn't like what he was signaling about body, that kind of stuff. Now, we never fat shame on this show. We're not interested in fat shaming, and I still accept and love Trump the way he is. I'm talking about just ideals for the American public, and the role of the president really should be at this point be in health and do some exercise, and that's all we need, right? A president who does like morning exercises and inspires the American population to eat better is basically all we need, right? That's what the president ought to be at this point, right? Someone who eats really well and does that kind of stuff. So there you go. So he's aware of the fear and all that stuff. Wall Street Silver mentions, if RFK were to die under any suspicious circumstances, it would be time to fully shut down multiple government agencies. There's just no other option. Yeah, I would say I'm there. He also goes into, Kennedy also brings up the point that even just doing the Joe Rogan, and I'm sure it's going to do amazing numbers, right? And him and his prediction that he had a little while ago that podcasts will be the way the next president is determined. Imagine Joe Biden trying to do the Joe Rogan show. He can't say a scripted sentence. It's obviously never going to happen, right? But here's what he says. They tried to ignore me, and that strategy has failed. Now their coordinated attacks in Time, WAPO, New York Times, Guardian, using the same language exposes fear in the ranks of the corporate oligarchy. Luckily, we have outlets like Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, and the podcast world, and our network of supporters like you, thanks, to bypass the legacy media. So he's just asking for money here, but out there saying, look, this is what we're doing, right? This is what's going on, and we're going to keep using these podcasts to get the word out, and indeed, it's working, right? So he also mentions a little bit about his book, Anthony Fauci, right? The real Anthony Fauci. And Joe Rogan mentions in that, if what you're saying about this book was not true, I do not understand how you are not being sued. You would immediately be sued. And indeed, that is a pretty nice red flag to have been pointed out, something I never thought of, that Joe Rogan hit the nail on the head here, is that indeed, these people are pretty litigious, especially the medical industry. I mean, the medical, big pharma, they'll sue anyone's ass off for doing any little thing. And this is the book is probably so well researched. There's probably stuff in RFK's book that is not true, right? I haven't read The Real Anthony Fauci, but I bet you there's pieces that are artfully designed. Now, I'm not accusing RFK of lying. That's the one thing I will say he doesn't do, right? And that's why we like him. He can be wrong about things. He just doesn't come across as a liar to me at all, right? At all, like zero. So I bet you there's parts of the book, though, where he's just wrong and got it wrong and didn't know, and who knows. But it's probably enough to sue on. It's probably enough material in there that is just off the mark enough that you could have litigation and go with it. The reason why you wouldn't is you wouldn't want to actually do any Streisand effect stuff, right? You wouldn't want to give this attention because there's probably enough in there that is true that you don't want people talking about, right? If you've got to start sifting through what's true and what isn't in that book, I doubt Fauci survives, right? I doubt Fauci survives that. But here's the even this idea of anti-vaxxer and how the manipulation system, how the persuasion system, the psychological control that a lot of folks in the deep state understand how to manipulate, right? The psychological control aspect being something that isn't really out there. That's one reason why this show, I think, fills a sort of void in there. We're not out here trying to tell you that there are forces persuading you. We're showing you how they persuade you. We're going past the sale of, did you know you're being manipulated by? No, we're showing you how they manipulate. We're not even bothering, did you know, all that kind of stuff, right? We're showing the actual techniques that they have been perfected over years, that are well understood, that people who are in this business of mass persuasion understand. They understand fear as a motivator. They understand the social aspects of looking at your neighbor, seeing how they're behaving, and how that becomes codified and mimicked, right? That we're all these kind of that we ape things, right? That we just can't help it. We're human beings. It's very difficult not to be persuaded by groupthink, and we're social animals, and that's just the way it goes, right? You can see it even in Bitcoin. There's crazy things Bitcoiners believe all the time because it's cool and you're in the in crowd with the Bitcoiners if you believe that. And so that's how you have to think. So everyone is guilty of this, right? There's no difference. And that's what persuaders and manipulators understand, that there are they're not defects, but there are features of the human mind that will never fail to be useful to people who would manipulate. Even the people who manipulate, like, for example, we were just talking about Trump, right? Trump, one of the great manipulators of all time. Right? That's why he can stand up to these people. His skill set is so great that individually he has the capacity to work against central broadcasting and mimetic desire is what Louis is saying here. Absolutely, it's mimetic desire. And so even Trump, like we were just talking about Trump's diet. Trump gets spun by the dopamine dealers in big food all the time, right? You can see that, it's obvious, right? So that's fine, right? But this anti-vax term is what Joe Rogan and RFK got deep into, and it dealt with the manipulation that Joe Rogan experienced himself. Now imagine having Joe Rogan on the side of the anti-manipulators against the central broadcasting entities. And if he gets motivated this time, which I hope he does, I still always sort of wondered why Joe Rogan couldn't get further behind Trump and all that was going on, right? It always not bothered me, but I just didn't see why it didn't fit naturally, right? But now we're starting to get there. A motivated and politically active Joe Rogan is exactly what's needed at this time in America. And so he was talking about his CNN thing where they painted him yellow and made him look like he was coming out of a morgue, and then he was taking horse tranquilizer, and that he was taking the horse medicine. And so right away he saw exactly how this confluence of media manipulators and health organizations and all the other three-letter agencies in America had targeted him and had come up with this narrative, and he saw its distribution into mainstream media, right? The only way to explain how the talking point on horse medicine and Anderson Cooper and all those people who mentioned it could make sense was if it was done this way. So here's what they said about how effective this has been, this anti-vaxxer thing, right? So anti-vaxxer is a very dismissive and pejorative and a very bad term. People are terrified of being called an anti-vaxxer. It's very dismissive. And it's kind of amazing what they've done, especially in a world where we're aware of the side effects that were hidden from the public and other drugs, whether it's opiates or whether it's Vioxx, or we're aware of the deception that has taken place, right? And so here he's talking about his face turning yellow, and to repeat it over and over again is the proof that he was the victim of this conspiracy, right? They talked a lot about the other glyphosate, right? I didn't know this. So he was breaking down the history of the fertilizers, right? So glyphosate, the Roundup corn, the pesticide Roundup corn. What they realized is that it killed everything green, right? It was just lucky. They just threw some in the backyard and everything green died. So they engineered corn that wouldn't die. And what you did, we sprayed this stuff at the beginning of the season, and it would kill the weeds, but the corn would come through. But then they realized an important new application of it, which was in wheat. And what they found was wheat, once it's dry, if it gets wet again, it's actually rotten and you can't harvest it. But If you kill it just before, it won't go moldy. And if it rains, it'll still stay dry. It just dries again. There's no mold. So what they started doing was they started dusting with the Roundup again at the end of the season on food, not on plants, on food at this point, because that stuff is milled immediately. And he believes that that's the reason why so this only happened in 2006. And that's why, and I did observe this. So this is a confirmation narrative bias. I remember in 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, that was when that whole I'm a celiac and can't eat bread thing started. And one of my best friends, who is not a baby lala, who's not out there crying, one of the guys I was with last weekend, he couldn't eat any meat or any breads anymore ever. At that time in history, it was 2006, and he just was done out of nowhere. Like, he had never had a health problem in his life, and to this day he has trouble and struggles with this stuff, and no one has been able to figure it out. And he wasn't the only one, right? There are Crohn's and all these other folks. But here in the end, so they talk about what I think is the most important part of the whole. That's what I meant. Yeah, sorry, I can't remember some of the glyphosate. Yes, pardon me. I said glycophosphate. Yes, glyphosate. Thank you, Justin. Pardon me. I appreciate the help. So, but here was the most important thing he said, right? And I think about the vaccines, but I think it applies. So he's talking about the vaccines now, but it applies to absolutely everything around us. And it applies to what we heard Tucker talk about, and it applies to Bitcoin inevitably, because that's where this heads, and this is what it looks like. So he says why it's difficult for people to question vaccines, but it goes further. He says it threatens our entire worldview. If the authorities in our world were lying about something so insidious, then what else are they deceiving us about? Mark Twain said it's easier to fool a man than to persuade him that he's been fooled. Right? Indeed. Like that's all you need to know. That's all you need to know about Bitcoin, about what's going on in the world, about everything, right? The most important information that you can put in your brain right now to understand and make sense of the world was what Mark Twain said, right? It's easier to fool a man than persuade them they've been fooled. It's much easier. It's not even close, right? Ego, it threatens their worldview, right? Ego. You can't admit you were wrong. Therefore, you double down on Joe Biden is just a nice uncle. Check out the wicked car, nice shades, right? There is so many things that are threatening about believing the counter narrative, because then can I trust my doctor? Can I trust the authorities? Can I trust my country? And here's a beautifully worded thing. It's really just the entire cosmology around which we've weaved and constructed our lives. You have to start questioning everything. And I understand why people don't want to do that, right? I understand why people don't want to do that. It's a lot. It's a lot to think about. It's not easy. And Bitcoiners have a major advantage because we perceived this confluence of persuasion, money, military a long time ago. And we've had a long time to absorb it. I've said to many people, oh, how do you do so much in Bitcoin? How have you people ask me, right? How did you know that? Where'd you come up with that? I just tell everyone, I've just had more time with it. That's it. My only special advantage in Bitcoin is that I accepted 10 years ago that we were going to win. There was almost no way to stop us from winning. And I started thinking about the world with Bitcoin at the base, and a sense of measurement could be then had around almost everything: healthcare, what's going on with people lying in the media, politics, all of that stuff, right? The only advantage that I ever had is that I just accepted it earlier. That's it. Once you accept it, things get a lot easier, right? So from there, you can start to see where things are headed. Now, you get people mentioning he's on, right? We had RFK on Joe Rogan yesterday. What happened simultaneous to that? Well, Axios had to come up with the following story. Biden could lose the first two 2024 contests to RFK Jr. And it looks like the cheating around Iowa and New Hampshire is going to become overt. Here's what it's going to look like. Dems in Iowa and New Hampshire could defy Biden, because right now they're not counting those primaries. They're saying because they're not following the Democrat order list, and they're not, which is now out of whack. They've gone to South Carolina first. they're just not going to recognize them. So here's what's going to happen. Dems in Iowa and New Hampshire could defy Biden and move ahead with their contests, even as the party warns it will strip them of the national convention delegates if they jump the gun. That sets up a scenario in which RFK Jr. could win those states and embarrass the president, right? Now, we'll see if that happens. But let's put all of these pieces in place, right? We got Gal Luft, who's a major de-dollarization guy. His contemporary whistleblower is dead, maybe. We don't know where he is, undisclosed location as of 3 days ago. But he's out there writing about de-dollarization, right? And what's going on right now. 20 new countries have applied to join BRICS. The list is enormous. It's Saudi, UAE, Egypt, Algeria, Bahrain, Indonesia, Argentina, Mexico, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Venezuela, Iran, Kazakhstan, Turkey, Syria, and Nicaragua. And this is what they say. The new BRICS currency being discussed will reportedly be backed by gold, rare earth metals, and the other natural resources of the BRICS members, with expansion bringing in the vast natural resource wealth of new members. While the US dollar is backed arguably by nothing other than the US military dominance and declining hegemonic bullying, will the arrival of the BRICS currency deal a quick and fatal blow to the position of the dollar as the world's most important currency? Now, look, we've got the SEC, and looks like the infighting around SEC Democrat corruption is inviting other Democrat potential narratives, dialogues. Is what's going on with BlackRock a sort of infighting Democrat thing? I don't know. I won't go that far. Something's up. Something doesn't smell right with this SEC thing and BlackRock. Something's going on over there. We'll find out. Are people finally giving up on the Biden thing? I think so. I think it's got to be clear, right, that the deep state doesn't actually have the kind of power to silence everybody, right? That's just not one of their powers. Now, they can manipulate, they can lie, but the weakness of the institutions upon which they're leaning to persuade is becoming more and more apparent. Like, I mean, is Anderson Cooper really moving the dial anymore, right? Like, is anyone out there like, oh, did you hear what Anderson Cooper said? Oh, nobody. No one's listening to MSNBC. The numbers are still low. Fox is going down. Who knows what's going on? So we'll see what's going on. We'll see. But here's the thing, right? We are going to actually have a Democrat primary that features the conversations that RFK is bringing up. We are, again, talking about the destruction of the U.S. military industrial complex, the censorship industrial complex, and the financial manipulation that goes in behind it all at once. So we'll see. But this is looking like the simulation is winking pretty heavily at us. And I continue to think we're going to get an RFK presidency. It's just absolutely the most entertaining potential outcome here, and I can't imagine it won't go that way. We're going to find out. All right, let's see what people say. Let's see where we're at here. Tired of the bully. Let's see where we got. Where are we? But okay, I think we can go here. There we go. Tried to bench too much without a spotter. Why are whistleblowers so focused on their physical health? Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. All right. I love started. Thanks, HBDC. No, there's no fictions less interesting that we're seeing. Dead people. It could, but they'd be boring because no one will believe it, including myself. No, this is beyond. This is beyond that. John got his hand up. Joe, pardon me, got his hand up. How's it going, Joe? It can still be a tool of the state, but it's not free. So they better be magnitudes better at using this tool because it will run them. Yeah. Oh, really? I know he's been on before, but I haven't listened to Joe in a bit. Looking forward to that one. Thanks for the heads up. Yeah, this is about what's his name on the thing. Richard Grove at the Grand Theft World has all we need to know about how. I'll check that out. Richard Grove at Grand Theft World. I've been watching Truth media or something lately on. That's been let me tell you what it's called. It's been pretty good. I'll give you a YouTube channel tip. Let me just see what it was called. It's Truth Stream Media. I've been doing some Truth Stream Media. They've been one of my. I'm a big YouTube. YouTube is just the best form of entertainment, by the way. I love it. I don't watch anything else but it. RFK security deal has to be minimal. If you look at Trump's, DC has refused to beef up his security package. Why? The American has to step up when he went to New York to private extra. Yeah, it's not that big, Optimus. It's not a huge, not what I saw in Miami. It's not huge, but it's enough. It's enough. You know. Am I talking about some kind of title for the president? Like a role model? Yeah, like the president should be, I think we're talking about the president and waistlines here. What I mean is the president is better off being like a royal and setting, like when people, here's an example of me defending the monarchy, right? Remember Kate, everyone loves Kate, William's wife. When Kate came in, I said, what's going to be great about Kate is that she's going to not dress licentiously. She's going to have, like an old fashioned kind of female style, and it's going to inspire that style in other women, right? So that's it. But that's a lot, right? That's a lot. And you could probably not produce such an effect in many other ways. You can't just hope celebrity culture figures it out. So it's one of the things that was predicted by King George when America got rid of its king, that they would suffer from want of a king. And I've said it for a long time. One of the things that the parliamentary system gets right is that you don't have to look to your president to be a moral, or your prime minister to be a moral leader, because you have a king and queen. The prime minister can be a big idiot, dirty, stinky. If they're good at their job as a executive, fine, right? They're like a CEO. Who cares if they do all these things? But that's a problem that America got itself into when it tried to create a thing where the president was also the chief executive, because then they do have to be morally sound. And that's what I was saying around the time of the Clinton Lewinsky thing. That was my conclusion, right? Like if we ever had that in Canada or the United States, that this stuff was happening, we'd kind of be fine with it, right? Because the Queen existed and all that stuff. Now that it's Charles, everything changes because he's so bad. But yeah, I think the president, it was designed to be a role model job in the first place. I mean, think about how the job was done for years. It was all following the model that George Washington modeled, right? So that's the way it worked. And if the president turns into, so for example, my support of Kanye West as a potential president is all about that, right? I think he can be a better leader in a sense about what Americans should be interested in and how they should, sort of do some things. And now he's probably not the best example, but that was initially what I was thinking. Yeah, Trump needs to go low carb, no seed oil. He sure does. Yeah, he sure does. He sure does. Great book, must read. Yeah, the Fauci book. Yeah, I haven't read it. I just love that we're still able to have these conversations on this while we build potential alternatives. Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. I think he genuinely just didn't believe it was a solution and couldn't see the real problem, even though he was fully aware of the many issues manifesting because of the problem. I think we're talking about Joe. I think we're talking about Joe. It made Joe hard for me to listen to, especially after knowing he's had people like Andreas Antonopoulos on. Yeah, he should get some more. He's got to get some more Bitcoiners, but maybe he just needed some more touch points. I can understand his hesitation given the size of his audience. That's what I always thought it was. It really doesn't mean much to be an anti-vaxxer. It's true. Based on the fact that we're changing the definition of such important words for political gains, you can call me an anti-vaxxer too. Yeah, you can call me a terrorist. I introduce myself as a terrorist now, usually. It's a breakup. That's what I'm saying. It's a breakup. It's a breakup. Confronting the daily cognitive dissonance keeps us on top. And I think not being tripped up by the daily cognitive dissonance is why we're going to win, right? We're just more energetic about every issue because we're not spending time like rejigging our brain every time something happens. Bitcoin Graffiti, Cosma Jenny. Yes, you're right. I think I read that incorrectly. Yeah, the horse has to choose to drink the water. As Bitcoiners, you learn that lesson pretty quickly. Egos can run hot as F. Yeah, and indeed, it is the that you use the word choice there is important because you can even apply that to like drug addicts, right? Have you ever tried to help a friend on drugs or a family member? Guess what? It's up to them. They got to make a choice. Now you can listen and da 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 da. That's fine. That works in its own way, but unless they choose, it ain't going to happen, right? Almost everything, even your own success in life, right? It's a personal choice. Now, the choices are hard, but if you boil everything down to what's the cost, what price do I have to pay for this thing that I want, and pay the price, right? Pay it. That's a choice. You can sit there and say, oh, it's too much. The price, I can't do that, right? Well, then you didn't really want it, right? Anything you want in life is available if you're willing to pay the price. The price could be 10 years of some bullshit, but that's the price, right? That's the price. And you can get what you want if you choose it. And choosing and deciding on something are not the same as wanting. And, I don't take any drug addict who's trying to get off seriously until I hear they've decided and that's what they want. They've decided and they've chosen that, not just expressing that they want to be sober. Not enough. It's not going to get you there, right? No way. Bitcoiners do know it's all been built on sand, man. Right or wrong, I'd rather know. Seems like most folks can't look while Bitcoiners can't look away. That's a really good way of putting it. But that's why we're gonna help all these broken brains and all these people, man. There's no way it keeps going just on craziness, right? America need a young innovator and not the old cargo. Yeah, we don't get to choose. We don't get to choose. And it looks like in history, the president, whoever gets it, seems to be the right person at the right time. And I'll say that about Joe. I mean, honestly, easily. What we needed was this total lack of confidence to change the role of president. So Joe is the perfect leader at the perfect time. As a Bitcoiner, I said it about Trump, but Trump too, I mean, better for democracy, but I'm not here for democracy. I don't give a fuck. It's stupid, right? Do you know where liberty actually comes from? It's by how you live your life, right? We used to understand that liberty is a psychological state, a personal expression of how you live. It has nothing to do with democracy. They're not the same. Democracy can get out of the way of you being free, right? That's the best it can do. It can prevent being an obstacle. But it's not going to give it to you. It never was designed that way. Everyone, if you go way back even to the Roman times, what they understood and where a lot of Western society comes from, why Rome is not Western, right? What Rome is not the Western world. It's not. It's something totally different. It's much more like China or Russia in their own political organizations. It was a longhouse type of, totalitarianism. The German people, who were the barbarians, lived in the land, and you couldn't tell them anything about you can't hunt this and you can't do that. That was all crazy to them. And they would have never listened to a government who had told them they could or couldn't. And that's the distinction, right? The German people took what they could from, and it's very explicit. If you ever go to Germany, you'll see that anything of civilization has a Latin word, gymnasium, curriculum. They use all these Latin words, explicitly Latin words, to talk about state organization. And so you can see in the German language the very clear distinction between freedom and all that, and liberty, and state apparatus. The languages are different, and it's clear. So in the case of one of the big mythologies here is that democracy is totally synonymous with liberty. It's not even close. They're not even nearly the same thing. Democracy is simply the formal process of abridging your liberty, which is fine. I mean, I understand why some people want to abridge it in certain ways, but for the collective benefit, but that's not how liberty is created, right? We've completely forgotten that is just barely even on our register anymore. Bitcoiners get that, and that's the energy we're bringing back. So all this to say, when you say an innovative leader, I would love one too, but we don't get to choose, and what we get is what we get. And I think RFK, think about it, he was in the room with Kennedy, just a little boy, but hearing the speech that Eisenhower gave about the military-industrial complex certainly informs what he thinks today. And if remember, the first prediction I gave on RFK being president was from November, and it was because Tucker was talking about the CIA's involvement in JFK's death. I had no clue. I mean, I was following RFK with the vaccine stuff and everything before. I'd been following RFK since the beginning of the pandemic, or since he started speaking out in the pandemic. But I'd never thought of him as president. But I said that day, I think he's going to be the president, simply because it just brings the narrative together. He embodies the story that we have to hear. And if you talk about this ego thing and people not facing it, they face it better when it's an entertaining story. If it's Trump wins and destroys this deep state, it's not the ending a lot of people want, right? That's the ending that the ego is not going to let them have. But if it's RFK and you get to find out about JFK and you get to find out about what's been going on for the past 40 or 50 years in America, then that's a story that people can dig their teeth into and are going to chew on for quite a while. So what is RFK's view on the Second Amendment? My understanding is pro Second Amendment, and what he says about guns in defense, because when you do the school shootings, right, he's the only one willing to go to the crazy place, as far as kicking up a hornet's nest. He doesn't say it's a 2A thing ever. He says, what about all these drugs they give kids? Do you know what, everyone comparing, Americans have more guns per capita than all these other teenagers in the world and blah, blah, blah. And that's why we have school shootings. He's the only guy out there saying, well, do you know what else we have 3x more of than everyone else in the world? Teenage medical addiction to all of and they're the ones that make you sort of not know the difference between shooting video game people and real people because they numb your emotions, right? Now, I've never taken one of these drugs in my life, so I have no idea what I'm talking about, right, on the drugs. I'm just saying what he says. He's gone to a place where you get in much more trouble than talking about pro-gun stuff. So he's gone to the crazier place than the gun rights, right? He's talking about the drug business. So thoughts on the Tether FUD? Yeah, I always Tether FUD. I don't care. Let him keep doing that stuff. I've been talking about Tether on television for years. I've never seen it. As far as it doesn't register with me. We are fans of Tether, and we always have been. Yeah, so that's the Second Amendment question. Going to replay this to wife to help orange pill. Thanks, Robert. I hope it's interesting. I'm right here with you. The most you can ask for any leader is the ability to motivate others to take care of themselves and each other as well. Yeah, and look, do we ever want to listen to people who can't take care of themselves? Right? That's why I think honestly, RFK just being in shape is all he needs to do as president. Right? In the same way that Trump's mere election was enough to break things, I think RFK is the same. Just his mere election is enough to break things. That he is so well versed on a bunch of subjects is also super helpful. It's a bit like, oh, the Beatles are changing music, or the most famous band in the world, or the most popular. They also happen to be the best in their time. It's a little bit like that, right? Like we're lucky to have all of these features and attributes about RFK, but he also is really good in certain subjects. So, especially Bitcoin. So, I think if he just does what he does, right, just goes and is healthy, we're going to be great, right? We're going to be great. If he shares his diet tips with people, that's what Americans need. Can we go back up to $69,000? It's happening, Senor Gringo Papi. Very soon. May have the leader title, but it's still a single human. Yeah. When bored, yeah, I got to get the board going again, Bitcoin Graffiti. You're 100% right. The board will be back soon. I just didn't want to buy a new one. I left the other one in the farm, but I'm going to the farm Monday. Oh, no show tomorrow or Sunday. I'm going to Toronto tomorrow morning early on the train for Bitcoin Canada conference, and so I'll be traveling. I'll be back Sunday night, so I will be definitely doing a show Monday morning here, and then Monday I'm probably headed out to Vermont, and I'll be there for a little while, a couple weeks. And it's sort of fireworks season. If you guys don't know, we get in Quebec, there's something called Saint Jean Baptiste, which is the 24th of June, and that's the Fête Nationale. And so we'll be doing some Quebec firework partying on the Saturday, and the following Saturday is Canada Day, so there'll be some fireworking then. And then the following couple days later is July 4th, so I've got to propagandize and brainwash my children. So I'll be bringing them to all of those events. But I will not be singing the Canadian National Anthem is the dumbest thing going. And they're changing it again. So now it's on, they're going to change the land on native land, something like that. Anyway, it's dumb. No anthem singing. CK in the house in Oslo. Way late, but good morning. Indeed, good morning. This is on all the channels. The truth wins eventually, but it accords with reality by definition. Yeah. So the best definition of the truth that I've ever read, how do you define the truth, comes from David Deutsch. If you guys remember very briefly in that movie, The Avengers Endgame, when Captain America goes to see Tony Stark and Iron Man and tries to talk to him about the time heist. And Tony Stark laughs at him and he says, "Oh, you've solved the Deutsch equation or something." Well, David Deutsch is one of the original quantum cryptographers in the world. Some people say he's one of the smartest people in the world. He might be. Really smart guy. He is the inventor of the concept of the multiverse and all of that stuff. And what he says is the following, his definition of the truth. It's relevant because it's starting to make waves in terms of AI and what's going on with all that. So what he basically says is all human progress is a search for hard to vary assertions about reality. The truth is merely a hard to vary assertion about reality. Hard to vary, basically what is not entropic. Things that can't suffer from entropy are the truth. So hard to vary assertions about reality equals the truth. And indeed, because it is hard to vary, it will stay consistent while everything else decays and degrades around it. The false things are easy to vary, right? Because they're false. So it's very easy to argue with them. So I continue to think that's the best definition of reality and truth. And it's very useful. I can't wait to read. I can't wait till you read what I'm working on. For sure, this conversation is quite poetic given the context in my head. Awesome, HBDC. Tough love. Great day, y'all. It's the enormity. Yeah, and I think you're talking about the level of lying and that ego piece, and it is really important, right? I wanted to need to get sober 3 years ago next month. Yeah, there you go. It happens when you make a choice, right? It happens when you make a choice. Wanting and deciding are not the same thing. Just a matter of time, Senor Gringo. Just a matter of time. Leader of the free world. We're talking about our favorite Joe Biden, leader of the free world. Bitcoiners indeed are all free. Love that clarity regarding liberty and democracy. Thanks, Boo Boo. Yeah, it's the big myth and scam here is democracy. Liberty is not the same thing. It's just not. Right? If these presidents are like CEOs, they should shop around for a new country. Like, let's make Trump the president of the EU and make. Yeah, well, I've always admired Hong Kong, and I'm bullish again on Hong Kong. I think it's going to make a comeback despite China's troubles with it. And the reason I'm bullish on them, they always called their mayor the CEO of Hong Kong. They just got right to the punch, right? That's what's better than that. Tries the biggest weasel in crypto. Oh, yeah, I'm not a fan at all. Not a fan. That would be hilarious. Yeah. It would be really be hilarious. That's why the slogan is live free or die and not vote this way or that way. Yeah. There you go, Boo Boo. Exactly. vote this way and be free. No, live free or die. There you go. Puppet. Sounds like a great model. Companies work like this. Somehow politicians are tethered to their nation of birth. Let's get rid of it. Yeah, I mean, 100%. 100%. Always been a fan of that idea. I only slept for 3 hours to make it to this one, and it was 100%. Thanks, HVDC. I appreciate it, man. That's very excellent endorsement. I appreciate it. Big box lumber yards usually have 4x2 white melamine. Excellent whiteboard. I didn't know that. Yeah, I always buy them at the at those office stores, and they're always like $100 or something. So I've got enough of them around. I just forgot to bring it from the farm. I forgot a bunch of stuff at the farm the other day, so it'll be back, and I do miss them. But I will tell you, Bitcoin Graffiti. Here's one caveat: the creative time and energy that I normally put into the whiteboards, I have displaced into the AI thumbnails, because those do take a bit of time. Sometimes I get lucky, but I gotta poke around a bunch, and it can take me 10 minutes or whatever, which is really the 10 minutes I always had on hand for the boards. So one of those days, if I get, there's a reason. Today was a reason. I would have put the, I would have easily put the Tucker checklist of what you need to do to be a despot on there, and I bet you the icons would have been real good. But we didn't get there, so we will get back to it, though, for sure. I'm really hoping for a turnaround in the next couple of years. P-Man, it's happening this year. All right, it's happening this year, 2024. The turnaround's already there. We're already in the golden age. Here's the ultimate message of all of this. We don't need to worry about any of this stuff. It's all falling apart. It's falling apart. It's already over. We already won. Really, we did. Now, I'm not saying you don't have to go out and do stuff. Synchronicity. There might be a sign for you to throw your hat in the ring. You know, I feel like I doing this every morning is part of being active about change. So I don't want to be complicit about change, but you can't stop it. It's already happening, right? We are already in the golden age. We're already there. We're already there. We just have to exercise a few more demons, and we're going to be living in it. David Deutsch theory is like the paradigm shift model. It's not so much about the model, but that it delivers a high predictive power that can be applied to technology. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yes. Whomever adopts it will win. Maybe the truth is just what works the best. Yeah. Disband the EU. Your drawings are great, though. Thanks, Bitcoin Graffiti. We're like I said, we're not out. It really is just that I don't have a board lying around, and that's how I do it. I have a board lying around, and then I just start drawing, and because I had an idea, and without the board, I don't even get to the idea. You know, like it's just been not in the mix. We need to pair you up with a BTC artist to draw what you talk about. Well, I mean, honestly, the AI stuff's going fine. I like the. It could be cool, yeah. But I'm liking that I'm getting so much volume out of the Midjourney stuff. Like, if you guys would see some, like, I don't even publish all the images I have, but I've got quite a collection now, and you're going to see a lot of the cool ones with Satoshi Wedding Murders as it comes out. So there's a lot. Let's put more comments. No, I gotta go. I got kids out there. I got kids saying, "Where are you, Daddy?" And because I'm leaving for the weekend again. My poor kids. That's fine. Very few days apart from them in their whole lives, but they notice. All right, team. Indeed, have a great weekend, and I will see you all Monday. Thanks for your patience on the weekend. We'll get back to Saturday shows shortly. I know it's been a few weeks. Yeah, indeed. It is here, just not evenly distributed. Bitcoiners are hoarding it all, and we're hodling the future at this point. But everyone's going to get a taste, and it's coming. All right, team.